Welcome to Build Strong Habits podcast channel. Sit back, relax, take your eyes off the screen, and listen. Just listen to this audio podcast, and let's start building habits that transform our life.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going deep on a book that really packs a punch. The Courage to be Disliked. I'm so excited to unpack this one.
Yeah, this book's a total mind bender. So much to dig into.
It really is. What's so interesting is the format. It's this dialogue between a philosopher and this young guy. It feels so real, so relatable,
Totally. That young guy is basically all of us, struggling with these big questions.
Exactly. He's our stand-in. And the ideas are just,
Yeah.
wow, this is not your typical self-help stuff. This is deep. Adlerian psychology, straight up.
Oh, for sure. This book is about way more than just, feeling good. It's about what it really takes to be happy.
So let's get right to it. One of the most radical things this book says is your past doesn't define you. That's huge.
Right, absolutely. I mean, so much of what we hear about psychology is about how our past shapes us. But Adler, he's like, nope, present choices, that's where it's at.
Whoa. Okay,
Oh.
So how does that even work?
Well, Adlerian psychology, it basically says we're not prisoners of our past experiences. We have the power to choose how we respond to them right now.
So it's not about denying our past or pretending it didn't happen.
Right. It's about recognizing that we're not defined by it. We can choose a different path, a different story, starting right now.
There's this quote in the book that really blew my mind. It says, you mustn't be afraid of being disliked, even by yourself, when you choose to change.
Right. That one hit me hard, too.
Whoa, that's deep.
It is. It's like we get so attached to our stories, even the negative ones, that the thought of changing, it's scary.
It's almost like we might even dislike ourselves for wanting something different.
Exactly. And the book really pushes us to confront that fear because real change, it requires courage.
Courage to be disliked, huh? Okay, I'm intrigued. So how do we start to break free from those old patterns, those old stories? Where do we even begin?
Well, Adler talks a lot about this thing called the inferiority complex. He says we all have it to some degree.
Well, what now?
The inferiority complex, basically, it's that feeling of not being good enough.
Oh, yeah. I know that feeling.
Right, we all do. And it's actually a natural part of being human. It drives us to strive, to improve.
But how can that be a good thing? I mean, feeling not good enough, that sounds pretty awful.
Well, it can be. But it can also be a source of motivation. It pushes us to learn, to grow, to become better versions of ourselves.
Okay, I see that. But how does this tie into the whole courage to be disliked thing?
Well, here's the thing. When we're stuck in that inferiority complex, we tend to crave approval from others. We're constantly seeking validation to prove our worth.
Oh, yeah. I totally get that.
Right. And that craving for approval, it can really hold us back because we end up prioritizing other people's happiness over our own.
So we're not really living for ourselves. We're living for what other people think of us.
Exactly. And that's where the courage comes in. The courage to say, you know what? I'm going to do what's right for me, even if it means disappointing someone else.
That's so powerful. But it's definitely easier said than done.
Oh, absolutely. It takes practice. It's about recognizing that we have the right to be ourselves, even if not everyone's going to like it.
It's like giving ourselves permission to be imperfect.
Totally. And that's a huge step towards finding true freedom and happiness. This reminds me of another big idea from the book, the separation of tasks.
Separation of tasks. Okay, what's that all about?
It sounds kind of technical, but it's actually super simple. Basically, it means recognizing that you're only responsible for your own actions and choices, not for other people's feelings or responses.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it. So if someone's upset with a decision I made, that's on them, not me.
Exactly. Their feelings are their own to process, and you don't have to bend over backward trying to fix it.
Wow, that's a game changer. But does that mean we should just ignore everyone else's feelings? Become totally self-centered?
No, not at all. It's not about being callous or inconsiderate. It's about setting healthy boundaries and recognizing that we can't control how other people feel.
So it's about finding that balance between being true to ourselves and being considerate of others.
Exactly. It's about having the courage to say, this is who I am and this is what I choose, even if it might disappoint you. And at the same time, acknowledging their feelings and treating them with respect.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. But man, that takes courage. Real courage.
It does. It requires us to face that deep-seated fear of not being liked, being judged or rejected. But the book argues that this courage is essential for living an authentic and fulfilling life.
Because when we're constantly seeking approval from others, we're not really living our own lives, are we?
Exactly. We become chameleons, blending in instead of standing out. But the truth is, our unique quirks, our imperfections, that's what makes us interesting. That's what makes us us.
You know what? I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together. The courage to change, separating tasks, it's all connected.
It is. It's like a whole new framework for understanding ourselves and our relationships. And there's so much more to explore.
So we're back. And I gotta say, I'm still wrestling with this whole courage to be disliked thing. I mean, it sounds almost, I don't know, counterintuitive.
I know, right? It's like, are we supposed to go out of our way to make people dislike us?
Exactly. Who wants that? I mean, we're social creatures. We want to be liked.
Oh, absolutely. Connection is super important. But here's the thing. Constantly seeking approval, it can actually prevent us from forming genuine connections.
Wait, really? How so?
Think about it. When we're so focused on pleasing everyone, we end up hiding parts of ourselves, suppressing our true thoughts and feelings.
So we're not really connecting with people as our authentic selves.
Exactly. We're presenting this carefully curated version of ourselves, this facade that might be likable, but it's not really us.
So it's kind of superficial connection.
Yeah, exactly. And that can be really lonely, actually.
So by having the courage to be disliked, we're actually opening ourselves up to deeper, more meaningful relationships.
You got it. When we embrace our authentic selves, warts and all, we attract people who resonate with who we truly are.
And those are the connections that really matter, right?
Absolutely. Not everyone will like us, of course, and that's okay.
It's like we're filtering out the people who aren't a good fit anyway?
Exactly. And that creates space for the people who do get us, who appreciate our quirks and imperfections. Those are the relationships that nourish our souls.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. But it still takes guts to risk being disliked, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do we even cultivate that kind of courage?
Well, it starts with self-acceptance, recognizing that we are worthy of love and belonging just as we are.
That's easier said than done, though, right?
Oh, for sure. It's a journey. But the book offers some really practical advice. For example, it talks about focusing on what you can control,
Like what?
like your own thoughts, actions, and choices, rather than trying to control how others perceive you.
So it's about shifting our attention from external validation to internal self-acceptance.
You nailed it. It's about recognizing that we can't control other people's opinions, but we can control how we respond to them.
I like that. It's empowering, right?
Totally. And this reminds me of another big idea from the book, the concept of purpose and contribution.
Ooh, yeah. What was that all about again?
Well, Adler believed that finding a sense of purpose is crucial for human happiness. He argued that we thrive when we feel like we're contributing to something larger than ourselves.
So it's not just about, like, self-improvement or personal gain.
Right. It's about finding meaning in something beyond our own individual needs. It's about connecting with something that gives our lives purpose.
And that impact doesn't have to be some grand, world-changing gesture, right?
Nope. It can be as simple as being a good friend, a supportive family member,
Yeah.
or volunteering in your community, anything.
I love that. It makes finding purpose feel so much more attainable.
Totally. And the beauty of it is, by focusing on contribution, we actually shift our attention away from ourselves and our insecurities. We start to see ourselves as part of something bigger, something interconnected.
Instead of worrying about what people think of us, we're focused on how we can make a positive impact.
Exactly. And in doing so, we often discover a sense of belonging and fulfillment that we might not have found otherwise. Like that saying, the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others.
I love that. And it ties perfectly into another key concept from the book, social interest.
Oh, yeah. Social interest, that one's huge.
Tell me more about that.
So Adler believed that we're all inherently social beings and that our well-being is intrinsically linked to the well-being of others.
So it's not about becoming a hermit and ignoring the world around us.
Not at all. It's about recognizing that we're all interconnected, that we thrive when we contribute to the collective good.
That makes a lot of sense. And that sense of belonging, that feeling of being part of something bigger than ourselves, that can be incredibly powerful. Man, this is all starting to make so much sense. It's like the courage to be disliked is actually a blueprint for a more fulfilling and meaningful life. But I'm also realizing that it requires a lot of, introspection, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It requires us to be honest with ourselves, about our values, our fears, our motivations.
It's about asking ourselves tough questions.
Yeah,
Being willing to challenge our own beliefs.
exactly. But how do we even begin to do that? How do we uncover those deeper layers of ourselves and figure out what truly matters to us? Well, the book suggests starting with self-reflection, taking time to really examine our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Like, what patterns do we notice? What values are guiding our choices? What fears are holding us back?
It's like taking a deep dive into our own inner world
Hmm.
and being willing to explore even the dark corners.
Right. It's about getting to know ourselves on a deeper level, understanding our strengths and weaknesses, and embracing our imperfections.
And once we have a better understanding of ourselves, we can start to make choices that align with our values, even if those choices lead us down a less traveled path.
Exactly. It's about having the courage to trust our intuition, to follow our own compass, even if it means deviating from the norm.
And that's where the courage to be disliked comes in, right?
Yeah,
Because those unconventional choices, they might not always be met with approval or understanding.
absolutely. But remember, true freedom comes from living in alignment with our authentic selves, not from trying to please everyone around us.
I'm starting to see how this all ties together. It's about self-acceptance, finding purpose, contributing to something larger than ourselves, and having the courage to be ourselves, even when it's uncomfortable. Wow, this is powerful stuff.
It is. And it's a journey, not a destination. There will be bumps along the way, moments of doubt and uncertainty. But the book reminds us that it's okay to stumble, to make mistakes, to course correct as we go.
It's about embracing the process,
Mm.
right? And celebrating the small victories along the way.
You got it. And remember, you don't have to go it alone. Connect with people who inspire you, who support your growth, who challenge you to be your best self. Having a supportive community can make all the difference.
This has been an incredibly insightful conversation. We've explored so many profound concepts from the courage to be disliked. But we're not done yet. In the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore some practical ways to apply these ideas in our everyday lives. And we'll share some tips for cultivating that all-important courage to be ourselves. Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into the courage to be disliked. And honestly, my brain is buzzing. We've covered so much ground, like ditching the past, embracing the present, finding purpose. But now, okay, how do we actually do this stuff? How do we put these ideas into practice?
Right. It's one thing to talk about it, but it's a whole other thing to live it.
Exactly. So where do we even start?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to remember that this isn't about reaching some perfect state of, enlightenment where we're totally fearless and never worry about what anyone thinks.
Oh, good. Because that sounds kind of impossible, honestly.
Yeah, it's not about being perfect. It's about growth. It's a process.
So it's not like you read this book and bam, you're
Yeah.
suddenly this boundary-setting, self-assured, purpose-driven superhero.
I wish. No, it definitely takes time and effort. There will be times when we fall back into old patterns, those insecurities creep in. It's normal.
So it's like learning any new skill, right?
Yeah.
You're going to mess up sometimes.
Exactly. And the key is to be kind to ourselves in those moments. Don't beat yourself up for not being perfect. Just gently nudge yourself back on track.
Okay, so how do we do that? What are some practical tips for navigating those bumps in the road? What can people actually do when they're struggling?
Well, one thing that's helped me is to start small. Instead of trying to change everything at once, focus on one specific area where you want to be more courageous.
Oh, that's a good idea. Break it down into manageable chunks.
Exactly. Maybe it's about setting boundaries with a certain person, or speaking up more authentically at work, or finally starting that project you've been putting off, whatever feels doable for you.
Yeah, that makes sense. Build up your courage muscles gradually.
Right. And remember, progress isn't always linear. You might take 2 steps forward and then, boom, 1 step back.
Yeah, I've definitely been there. But it's all part of the process, right?
Totally. And it's important to celebrate those small victories along the way, even those moments when you catch yourself slipping into an old pattern, but then you choose to do things differently. Those are huge.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Give yourself credit for those little wins. They add up. And, another thing that I think is so helpful is finding a supportive community. Surrounding yourself with people who get it, who are also on this path of self-discovery.
Absolutely. Having that support system can make a world of difference. It's so much easier to face those fears and challenge those old beliefs when you've got people cheering you on.
It's like having a team of personal cheerleaders, reminding you of your strength and encouraging you to keep going when it gets tough.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of self-care either. Taking care of yourself physically, emotionally, mentally, because when you're feeling depleted, it's so much harder to access that inner courage.
That's so true. You can't pour from an empty cup, right?
Right. So make sure you're doing things that nourish your soul, whether it's spending time in nature, connecting with loved ones, being creative, or just taking some quiet time for yourself.
This has been such an amazing conversation.
Hmm.
But before we wrap up, I want to touch on something we talked about earlier. Purpose and contribution. Like, how do we actually find that something larger than ourselves to dedicate our energy to?
Yeah, that's a big question. And it's different for everyone, of course. But I think it starts with paying attention to what lights you up, you know? What are you passionate about? What injustices make you angry? What problems do you feel compelled to solve?
Like listening to that inner voice that whispers, this matters.
Yes. And having the courage to follow that whisper, even if it leads you down a less conventional path.
Love it. And remember, purpose doesn't have to be this grand, extraordinary thing.
Right.
It could be found in the everyday, like in the small acts of kindness and service that we offer to others.
Exactly. Every action, every choice has the potential to make a positive impact.
Wow, so powerful.
It really is. And by focusing on contribution, not only do we make a difference in the world, but we also find a deeper sense of meaning and fulfillment in our own lives.
Well, I think it's safe to say that we've officially reached the end of our deep dive into the courage to be disliked.
Mm.
And honestly, this has been one of the most thought-provoking and inspiring conversations we've ever had.
I agree. It's a book that really pushes us to grow, to challenge ourselves, to become more authentic and empowered.
It's not always easy, but it's so worth it. So to everyone listening, if you're feeling even a little bit curious about these ideas, I highly encourage you to check out The Courage to be Disliked and embark on your own journey of self-discovery.
You won't regret it. And as we leave you today, remember this. The courage to be disliked is ultimately the courage to be yourself. Embrace your uniqueness, stand by your values, and live a life that feels true and meaningful to you.
That's it for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep living with courage.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Build Strong Habits. Let us know in the comments how you feel about it and what topics you'd love to hear next. Always remember, we're here to build strong habits together.